Are you saying hello or am I saying hello? Is Brian saying hello? Who's supposed to say hello? Hello? Welcome to
Hello.
Sketchy
Are we
Ideas.
out there?
Are we out? Are we live? Is this thing
I
on?
think we are.
Ding, ding, ding. Welcome back to Sketchy Ideas. Today it's the debate show where we're going to go head to head on smart goals versus basically not smart goals. Brad is taking the anything but smart goals approach. I, as you know, are defending the smart goals corner. We're very excited today because we actually have your questions and your ideas as well. So we're going to evaluate our ideas in terms of your questions and stress test some of our use cases. I'm very excited to be welcoming Brian, our producer, on. Brian, are you there?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Brian's going to queue up the questions, introduce debate rules. So, Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us how to make this a great show today.
Okay, so we have a few debate rules today. First one, each question, you guys will have 3 minutes to answer it. And then we'll have a minute 30 to respond, for the other person to respond to this question. And then a minute 30 to debate and alter the answer.
Wow, we got a clock on it. All right.
If you need to, you may call a friend. Has to be each other, obviously. You may agree to disagree on an answer. And lastly, no drawing on each other's faces.
Get all the fun out of this.
Yeah.
All right. So I think I get the first round. Is that right, Brian? I'm gonna go first.
Correct. So our first question is about SMART goals.
All right.
Can you alter SMART goals before your deadline, or is it better to do your best, evaluate what you have accomplished, and then use that as experience to base your next goal off of?
Okay, so can I alter my SMART goal before the deadline? I'm just going to simplify it down to that. Great question asker. The general answer is no, and there's a couple reasons why. Step one, or the first part of the answer is when you establish your goal, you're establishing your goal typically before the effort begins. Sports are a simple analogy on here. If I'm going to run a 100-yard dash, that 100 yards has been established before I take the line and before the gun gets fired. I know what the deadline, or I know the deadline, I know the goal, I know the thing I'm trying to achieve. If in the middle of the race, somebody moves that goal line, that finish line, then everything I've done up until that point is off. They bring it closer. Somebody else who hadn't planned on running the whole distance might win. They move it farther out. My last expensive energy might be gone before I get to my finish line. That's not how the world works typically. Typically, the goal you're striving for has been the goal you've been striving for has been established before you begin the effort. And more often than not, before you begin the effort is when you do your best thinking, because you can be objective, you can do some research, you can be thoughtful, and come up with a best case goal. And I say goal again because the effort to get there is what you're going to adjust. If along the way the path is blocked, or if along the way a resource is not there that you counted on, you need to figure it out, because you can't just say, let's bring that thing closer so that I'm still going to get there. More often than not, deadlines, timelines, the things that make up a goal, what success looks like, how much money I need to make this month, all those things are established before you begin. And more often than not by you. So therefore, the best time to create the goal is before you start. And you don't adjust the goal, you adjust the plans. What you learn along the way will help you set a better goal for your next effort, your next attempt, your next iteration. But always along the way, you're evaluating attempts, you're evaluating successes and failures, you're continuously improving to reach your goal, to get the measurement, get the timeline met, and all those other things. So I'm gonna hand off my last 45 seconds for rebuttal. So I guess, Brad, you can start your minute and a half early. That's why SMART goals are set ahead of time. 30 seconds. All right, you get 30 seconds bonus.
Kind of you.
You're welcome.
So kind of you for giving me your extra 30 seconds. And I guess you could feel confident, except I totally disagree with the fact that typically things don't change. When the universe changes the rules, you can't adjust your SMART goal. Therefore, sometimes when that happens, you just have to do. So if you have a general direction you're heading, that SMART goal doesn't matter, especially like in the world we are living in currently. So the world throws a curveball And that curveball means that the plate is moving on your baseball player, and you can just stand there and continue doing the same process, shooting for the same goal, but everything's moved. So, I mean, I think that's all I have to say to rebut your argument. Especially then, we can double down on it if you want, knowing, hey, when you don't hit it, you're supposed to plan and adjust. That sounds very familiar to learning as you're doing, to adjust what you're doing to get to the general direction. So if I need to go north, I don't know all of the walls, boulders, or trees in the way, right? But I'm just going north because I know generally that's where I need to go. And therefore, I'm just going to work through it. Now, I'm going to do FTAG, small, tangible, active goals, and I'm just going to continue to work forward. I'm going to continue to learn along the way, doubling down on my hedgehog premise here, right? Because guess what? You may not know what you're good at along the way. So your plan could be blown up. You may not know what is economical along the way, even though you just set the SMART goal that you can't change when the universe changes the rules. So therefore, you're just supposed to continue to not hit the goal, and then you feel bad, and then you just stop working towards the goals. And then the only way to get out of it is to just start doing. So realistically, your only saving grace out of getting out of your SMART goal process is to just do and move forward. That's what I got for you.
Okay. So it's interesting. I think one of the challenges is, and this is where we go back and forth and help each other out, right? So I think we're using different, I think we're equating terms we're conflating our terms. You're saying that the rules, the conditions, the constraints, and the barriers might change. I agree with you. What does not change is how we've defined success. So yes, the conditions might change. Insert pandemic here. In our volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous world, all of the stuff in the middle does change. But that doesn't necessarily change that I still need, I'm gonna use revenue as an example. If I know my expenses, I know what revenue I need to make this month. The conditions around which I make my revenue might change and probably will. However, it doesn't mean at the end of the month I can make less money and still pay all my bills. Like that doesn't change. So I still have that target I need to reach, that SMART goal. If I don't make it, then I adjust better for next time. And if the rules have changed long term, I might have a better idea of what my plans should be next time. But your changing of rules, conditions, constraints, and barriers, I agree with. None of that changes what success looks like. And that's what the goal defines.
Except if you don't know what success looks like, right? So if
okay,
sure, in the one case of knowing I have to hit this in order to survive, you might, if that's what we're using as like success equals survival, is that what we're saying?
Not necessarily, but I think if I'm going to take the time to set a goal, I should set a goal around things that really matter. When we work with business owners, we say your number one goal has to be revenue. If you're not making money, you don't have a business. Same thing goes for personal expenses. If you're not, I don't like to say that money makes everything work, but when you have money, you can usually figure out the rest of it. So your number one typical priority needs to be, am I financially sound?
Okay, so specifically speaking of business.
I'm using business, but I also have to use personal, right? If I'm not paying my bills, if my monthly expenses are exceeding my monthly income, that's not business, that's life. So if I don't have money to keep my world in its current condition, my conditions are going to change next month drastically, and therefore I need to make sure that I'm achieving my number one priority. And I'm using money. Whatever your number one priority is, when you know what that is and you set a goal around it, then that helps you maintain your focus and helps you make decisions later.
So what I'm hearing is if SMART goals are specific, when there is clarity on you understand some sort of process, there is a clear economical number or economical metric you're looking for.
Some sort of measurement, yep.
And you know exactly what you enjoy doing to get there.
Give or take. I'll give you that.
But if you don't know one of those three, you can't necessarily create a SMART goal.
And this is, I think, a good point of contention. You're right. And therefore, I'm going to say, you need to figure it out. You're going to say, just start doing it. And I'm going to say, I don't know if you really want to spend all of that time and effort figuring it. Because I think here's the point. And wait, I want to make sure we don't pre-address one of our other questions. So I might have to hold this next point.
Mr. Omeg, have we gone over? Have we debated this one enough?
Just a little bit.
All right. I'm gonna hold my next point.
I'm gonna hold my next point. We're gonna hold our next one. That's fine. All right. What's the next question?
Okay, our next question has to deal with Agile doing.
And who's it from? Who's it from? If you got a name.
I do not have a name for this one.
Okay.
Anonymous caller.
Exactly. This question is, how do you engage in Agile doing when collaborating as a team towards a common goal? How do you ensure all members' actions continue moving towards the shared vision?
All right. Agile doing. I like this one. You know why? Because this is how most software is built these days. It's in an Agile framework where they have Scrum and they talk regularly. So when you're working in a team and you're doing Agile doing, communication has to be at an ultimate high. And the reason is, especially when you're working towards just a general direction, most of the time you're just building things, and the only way you can make sure that those things hook up is if you're talking to each other. That's the simplest answer. And I know people are going to go, great, good for you.
It's nice in theory.
Talk more, yeah. And there are tools out there that you can use to do this. You got to understand that people aren't always going to be available. There's plenty of times that when you're Agile doing inside of a team, that's why I go back to, if there is a clear vision, right? And that vision is just backed by intent, then you're good to go. Because ideally, if these things have clarity, at least in direction, you don't need to set a SMART goal. Because then consistently people are going to row the boat in the same direction, right? So I don't need to put a number. I can go, look, the general direction is north. And as long as we all are looking at a compass going north, we will all head north. What you got for me? Go for it.
Well, you're making an assumption. And I think the assumption you're making an assumption on something which I'm going to just generally call group dynamics. AKA the forming, storming, norming, performing, if you are familiar with your theory. Your approach assumes that we have gotten to performing, which requires us to have already gotten through the first three. If a team, an organization, especially a high-performing team, to make a reference, is gone through forming, storming, norming, performing, and they have to go in that order, then we are able to approach with agility. We are able to have and be confident that we share a common vision and our intent is well aligned. What's the rest of your vistas again? Vision, intent, for those that have not been following along closely.
Strategy, tactics, accountability, and support.
Strategy, absolutely. Tactics is how we get the thing done. Strategy and goals are very much the same thing. Tactics is the effort to get there. We call them plans. VISTA, what was A again? Accountability?
Correct.
And what's the final S?
Support.
Support, which of course you need. So accountability goes back to expectations. So if you have a group that has been well formed and is ready to collaborate, then by all means, you can be agile, and you should be. And I'm not saying even that goals and plans cannot be agile. In fact, I'm saying quite the opposite. They really do need to be. But I think if that team has not gone through those stages, they don't have the goal, the direction, the intent, the vision in mind, or at best, they have it, but it might not be perfectly aligned. So I'm going to say mission, vision, and values, but not just to have them. A shared mission, a common vision, clearly communicated, clearly understood, aligned values, and clear expectations. You still need to check those things along the way. If you set a goal and start working on it, strategy to tactics, it doesn't mean that you just hope everything works out. You have to constantly check in on, am I maintaining my alignment? And in a group setting, I think there is a risk to an agile approach in a newly formed group that has not yet quite figured out how to best get work done and how everybody aligns around strengths and opportunities.
Just a brand new group, even if it's made up of high performers in general.
Every group goes through
play,
this,
right?
Well, okay, fair enough.
And
okay,
leadership comes into play. Mm-hmm. So if the leader has clarity in the direction, the general direction, then it will help because it will create a doing aspect that often inspires creativity in order to make that vision a reality.
When the leader communicates to the team, this is where we're going, what are they really saying?
It depends. Totally depends on the vision, right? I know what you want me to say. I know what you want me to say. I'm not going to say
it. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Are we just splitting hairs here?
In some cases, you are wrong. Because in some cases, that vision is not clear, right?
In some cases, you just said the vision has to be clear.
Not necessarily. I'm saying general direction.
General direction.
For example, that's why I continue to use the north example.
Right.
If we know generally, and we're in a group, and one person's right, like let's take the analogy of a ship, right? We have our boat. Okay, so we're in the ocean. Right, here's our boat. Our boat is in the ocean. Big old boat, right?
Big old boat.
And
we're
gonna make it a steamboat, right?
Sure.
So steamboat got what that means, and we've got the guy up here who's driving the boat, right? And he's holding on to the steering wheel.
Okay.
And then we've got the guy down here who's steering the rudder, right? That's under the water. That's picking the direction. And we got the guy in the engine room where there's a box, right? And this is making things move, right? There's a dude in here. I should say people, person. But the general idea is that as long as they're communicating and they just need to head north, then it's clear. They don't have to, maybe there is no destination. In your terms, in your SMART goals, north is your specific thing, your destination, right? But it's not necessarily measurable, right? Because we're not measuring time. We're not measuring achievement. We're measuring resources. We're not measuring those things or looking at those things. We're saying we're going north. And these three have to talk all the time, even if they were just thrown on a boat and they just got to get here. Right?
So in your world, it doesn't matter how long. In your world, it doesn't matter how long it takes us to get north.
It may not.
Or how far north we go.
It may not. Didn't matter for the people going. I will use the term west when crossing the Atlantic. Right? They were just exploring. They said we're going west.
I think you're mythologizing history a little bit there. Yeah, they're going west, but they all had an intent in mind. We're finding the Western Passage. We're finding
vision.
They had a goal. They had a destination in mind. It wasn't just general westerly.
But they didn't know what that destination looked like or what it was all the time. You can't say that. The first guy who went west on the Oregon Trail was exploring the whole Oregon Trail. He brought along what he thought he needed. And
to what purpose? Why was he doing it? What was his purpose?
Manifest destiny. Destiny.
That's a purpose. That's a goal.
But he didn't understand time, resource, measurables, any of that stuff. It was a general direction. So they just did. It was tangible, active decisions in order to get there.
All right, I'm gonna let you stand on that one for a minute. I know Brian's got one that I think might help us.
Right?
One more, and then I'm gonna come with my final rejoinder here.
All right.
Okay. Our last question is more of a collaborative question, and this question comes from Caitlin.
Collaboration? There's no collaboration on doing one board.
So her question is: a lot of my goals involve travel. Traveling requires a lot of planning and logistics, but I also like to keep things open-ended for exploration, so every plan isn't set in stone. Which way of goal setting is better for trips?
Depends.
That feels like I think we found our yes and.
And I can give examples for both. So would you like to start, Michael?
Yes. And I think, you know what, I'm actually going to use, I'm going to tell a very, very quick story. So when I graduated from college, myself and 4 other guys went backpacking in Europe. 2 engineers, 3 arts and letters guys. It was a good combo, but we didn't necessarily know that ahead of time. One of the engineers had done all the planning. He had figured out the trains we needed to take and pre-booked the hostels and all this other stuff, right? We land in Germany. We all jump on the train. Our first destination is Italy. We get to Italy, and the arts and letters guys are like, all right, let's just have some fun and get all loose. The problem was that didn't work fully. We needed both, right? We literally had a sit down, I think, on our second day because we hadn't figured out why we were all here. Common vision, common intent. I'll give you that. Now, what we understood was there's both. We have fixed and we have flexible, right? If we miss this train, we're like, we missed the train, we'll get the next one. No, if we miss this train, there's not another one until tomorrow. And that hostel that's holding our room for us won't have a room for us, and there's no other rooms in the inn. So therefore, yes, we can have lots of flexible time during the day, but we need to meet this cutoff milestone. Otherwise, it throws the rest of the pieces out of order. Okay, once we understood the fixed and flexible that we had to work within, everything was great. But until we understood the needs that everybody had and how we were all on the trip for different reasons, so to speak, we couldn't reconcile the fact that we can achieve all of our mutual goals as long as we understand where the constraints are on both sides. And I think that's a good example of how you can have both.
Yeah. I have a different story, but it's not really that different, you know. Don't judge my math of the U.S. too much. Remember, this show is not about drawing; it's about the sketchy ideas.
It says sketchy. It's in the title.
So we get the gist of what this is, right? We get, you know, with the U.S. All right, cool. All right. So I have 2 examples here. I have the planned trip with programming developed by Vicki James, my wonderful mother, for us to go to the wonderful world of, what do you think?
Disney,
yeah. Right? There's a clear plan, right? I hop on the plane, and that plane takes me down here. There probably was a stop in there. In fact, I know I went to Michigan, and then I went down, right? Cool. And now we spend a week there, and there's very rigid plans because this was a family trip. There wasn't much freedom necessarily, or like questions, but that's a plan where there is a specific measurable, right? We had a measured amount of time, and the achievement was, hey, we're going to spend time as a family, and the resources were to get there, and that time sensitive was, you know, all the above. Now,
got it.
In terms of the other one, this is where I say spring break my senior year. You know what we did? We drove from Madison. We said, you know what? We're just going to drive. So we actually spun a bottle and said, which direction are we going to head? And we said south. So, because we put it on a sheet of paper and we had north, south. We literally, it was north, south. And we took this dial and we just spun it, right? And wherever it ended up pointing was the general direction that we went.
Got it.
And so it ended up pointing south. So we drove south. Now, at every turn, the mile before, we did a similar thing. And and if it was a 1 or 2, we flipped the coin. If it was multiple directions, we laid them out and we rolled dice and we did a whole bunch of things, but it ended up going something along the lines of this. and we ended up actually over here in New Orleans. And would never have been to New Orleans if it hadn't been for that, which is why I say you have to explore to understand, and sometimes you just have to go, because we thought about discussing a whole plan and a whole trip, and I finally said, forget it.
Sure.
We're just going to hop in the car, we're going to choose a direction, and we're going to go. And every turn, we made a choice and we win. And I think we ended up, this is way wrong, but we ended up going down here. We went over to St. Louis. We went to Kansas City.
You probably doubled back on yourself at some point based on the law of averages. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Went to Memphis, ended up in New Orleans, went over to Mobile, and then came back up a slightly different way. Right.
Sure.
But the point is that SMART goals are great, except if you don't really know what it needs to be, if it's going to be enjoyable, if it's actually what you want to do, you have to explore it. You have to be open to exploring it. And sometimes by doing that, you will come to places like I saw a whole bunch of sites that I never would have seen if we hadn't done it that way.
Absolutely.
So, saw the king, where the king lived, all that stuff.
Very cool.
When it comes to travel, specifically with this situation, I think it's good to have plans, right? If there is a specific reason why you're doing that trip. But if you're just going to travel to try and explore and see things, often it's better to not have a plan, because you're going to come across things that you didn't think you'd come across. And that works in business too, right? Like working with a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily know what their business is. And so at that point, I say, let's try a bunch of stuff, right? What do you enjoy? Let's dive in. Who do you enjoy working with? All of that stuff. Same thing goes with business owners who've been doing it for a while, right? And they're like, I don't know where we need to go next. And you go, great. We've got a little different playground to work in, but you still got to go play in the playground in order to figure out, do you like the slide, the swings? You want to make the slide, make the swings. Maybe there's monkey bars that you didn't see. Maybe it's the wood chips, right? Maybe there's a sandbox. I don't know. But you got to do that in order to be able to then eventually set some SMART goals once you have clarity in exactly what it needs to happen. But that's, I think, the big difference between SMART goals and Agile doing.
So, yes, I will agree. I think.
Wait! I heard it.
Because I believe one can actually live inside the other. And I think that's because in all the things you're saying, I'm still hearing there was a goal there. There were constraints. And I think constraints is one of the things we need to keep in mind here. Understanding the constraints lets you operate within them. It's, where great innovation thinking is not, no rules. It's what are the constraints we have to operate within. In your spring break trip, you still had to get, I'm assuming you established who's got the first class on Monday. What time do we need to be back by, right? You had, no, didn't matter? Okay, then maybe that didn't matter. Did you have infinite funds?
We thought we
did. Did you have infinite time, right? There are some constraints we have to operate within.
Right, yes.
Right?
I can agree with that, yeah.
And I'm not saying it was wrong, but would you agree that at every mile marker, you were consistently remaking decisions? Is that true? You're making choices at every turn.
You're making a choice. Yep.
Right. Constant remaking. You have to remake that choice over and over and over. You were doing a whole lot of work. I'm not saying it was wrong. You did a whole lot of work, but you were doing a whole lot of work in small increments.
Mm-hmm.
So I think here's the difference. You used physics. I don't remember if it was in this forum or one of your socials, but former potential physics teacher here. So I'm going to use physics. Work is force over a distance. Break that all down, go through Newton's F equals ma, and what you end up with is work is mass, the size of the thing, the velocity, the speed of the thing, the distance, how long we have to go divided by time. You're going to have to do the work somewhere. You want to keep doing the work over and over and over and over and over in small pieces. Cool. I want to do all the work once and be done. So in the SMART goals approach, you do the work before, and a lot of the work is going to get done before you start. You don't end up with rework. You don't end up with nearly as many constant reevaluations. You don't have nearly as many decisions that need to get remade or rechecked, because you've pre-made all those decisions in advance. If I had known I was going to New Orleans, I wouldn't have to keep deciding which way to turn, right? All that would have been taken care of ahead of time. So the work that needs to get done regardless, because these conditions don't change. When I make those decisions, when I put in the work is the question. The benefit of SMART goals is do all of your work once in advance. If you don't like rework, if you don't like constantly having to make new decisions, if you hate decision fatigue, SMART goals is a great approach because you'll know, back to your brick wall, you'll know the size and depth and width of your wall. You'll understand all the tools and materials at hand, how long you have to work. And then the path will be clear. A problem well defined is half solved, says Kettering. And Kettering is right, because if you do all the work before you have to attack the problem, you're that much closer to the solution before you even begin.
Yeah, I can buy into that. That's, again, there's clarity, right? You've got way more information.
And I'm going to say, to your point earlier, you said, if you don't have the information, and as I said earlier, and this is really my point, you're going to actually spend less work, less effort if you get the information before you begin, assuming that at least part of it is gettable. I get that there are some things that are always unknown. The unknown should affect the plans. The unknown should not affect the goal, says this board.
Again, if there's clarity as to like what the destination is, totally understand.
You got it. I know we're at time. Have we? I don't know if we landed it or no. Did we?
I don't know. I mean, this is where I would.
We were supposed to collaborate.
Watching it. Yeah, I think. I think this is one of those things where we'll just agree to disagree on situations, and I think dependent on the situation, a different approach is needed. And at the end of the day, again, your approach is coming from known variables and known things, whereas on the other end of the spectrum where I'm coming from is there are a number of unknowns and unknown things, and maybe you're going to explore and figure it out, and then eventually come to the point of having some knowns, and now you can begin to set some SMART goals. But until that point, the only way you can get to a direction is you have a general direction and you're going to try things. And that might not be the right direction, so therefore you take a right turn.
Or a left turn, depending on where the coin lands.
Or a left turn, yeah, or where the arrow ends up. Exactly. I think that's where I'm at. I don't know about you.
That's good. I think it's good. Let's leave it to the audience. I think at this point, I think this would be a great time for us to invite the commentary. So whether you've watched this live or you're picking this up after the fact, drop us a note in the comments. Let us know. Do you agree that we should be disagreeing? Should we have landed this and clearly one side versus another? Is it situational? What are your thoughts? Let us know in the chat. And if you got more questions for us too, we'd be happy to pick those up too. More situational, I think that could be interesting for a future conversation. Brad, what other questions should we crowdsource?
I think if there's the other thing that I would like to hear from you, so this is the first time we've done this, what are some topics that others have disagreed upon, or concepts in leadership, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, general life? This is where we're trying to create conversations around this stuff that will affect all of us. So if you have thoughts about that, send them over at sketchyideas@ccmediagroup.co, or drop them in the comments below. And stay tuned. We're going to be bringing on some new guests in the coming weeks and some new ideas where we talk about sketchy ideas. And just remember, just because you read it on the internet doesn't make it so, right?
You got it. I'm Michael Rempolo with Spirity.
Right. I'm Brad James, and we'll see you later.
Take care, everybody.